Good morning. How y'all doing? Again, a mixed vibe. I'm fine. I'm doing good. How y'all doing?
Good.
Great.
Good.
Thank you.
I'm surprised at their energy. I'm like, these are all morning people.
On a Sunday, we're very proud. Very proud. Good morning and welcome to this lovely panel chaired by myself, Faye Kabali-Kagwa. It is called The Pressure to Produce, and we are going to, the expectation is that we're going to rail against capitalism.
I will.
And talk about mental health journeys and just talk about living in the world that we find ourselves in. So with me today, I have Relebone Rirhandzu, eAfrika, author of Broken Porcelain, which is her first baby. So please, a round of applause. I also have Jen Thorpe, who has done so many things and written many books. And she has released a new one, which teaches us all how to adult. Adulting 101 by Jen Thorpe. And then we have Tapiwa Guzha, who is the ice cream man. He makes ice cream. And a whole bunch of other things. But I also have their bios so that we can learn more about them. But Tapiwa also apparently has a book coming out soon, so let us please clap for his Phantom book. I'm very excited. So a little bit about our panelists. So we have Relebone Rirhandzu, eAfrika. She is a writer, editor, and podcast host of The 9 Lives of Depression Survivors. The Tsanin born and bred essayist, literacy advocate, life coach, and mental health advocate has been writing for years, but still sees herself as a baby writer.
True.
Is it true?
It's true.
Still.
Still.
Even after you did 4 different events here, you're still a baby writer. Okay. And she's got her debut book, Broken Porcelain, and it's a collection of essays exploring mental health. So that is her. And then we have Jen Thorpe, who's a feminist writer and researcher based in Cape Town, South Africa. Her first novel, The Peculiars, was longlisted for the Etisalat Prize for Literature and the Sunday Times Fiction Prize. And her second, The Fall, was longlisted for the Sunday Times CNA Fiction Prize. She has published poetry, flash fiction, and short stories on a number of online publishing platforms, including Itch, Brittle Paper, Aerodrome, Saraba Magazine, Books Live, and Poetry Potion. And she has published 3 feminist essay collections and has her new book, Adulting 101, due in 2022, which you've seen. And she created a baby who's 2 months old and is sitting in the front row. I love the fact that you clap for everything. It's very nice. And then we have Tapiwa, who is a Zimbabwean-born and Cape Town-based hedonist. Really? This is how you want to describe yourself to the world. Is a hedonist who believes a diverse life is a well-lived one. He's a generalist who tinkers with his body, hands, and mind in as many ways as possible, whether it be food, rope bondage, soap and jewelry making, sex education, calligraphy, body movement, or molecular biology, which he has a PhD in. Ne?
Wow. Most interesting person on the panel.
And if a human body is capable of doing it, he's probably keen on trying it. It's a very essential thing that he wrote. But we're here talking about creativity and what it means to produce, and I'd like to ask each of you, how would you describe yourselves in terms of creativity and production? Anyone can start.
You can start.
No. How would I describe myself in terms of creativity? I think I am a creative not because I want to be, but because it's kind of a compulsion. Somebody said compulsion yesterday when they talked about their work, and I feel the same way. It's like I can't not be.
Right.
Yeah. I wish I was like a mathematician or like, something else. I think everything has this sort of creativity aspect in it, but I'm really a creative because I am forced to be. I can't not be. I tried not to be. It didn't work out so well. So I create because, that thing that Maya Angelou said about, there's nothing as something as having an untold story in you, as burdensome as having an untold story in you. So it's basically that, like walking around with this, I've got to take a dump feeling. In order to feel like, I'm a regular person who doesn't need to be constipated, I create.
Lovely metaphors. A writer, everyone.
I don't know how I'm going to follow that now. Right now, I'm a frustrated creative. I have a 2-month-old, and it's really hard to produce when you're very, very tired. So, but normally, I'm a person who writes as the first form of outlet. I was going to say, like, you're a balloon that's heavily inflated and you need to let out, but I think I'll just go with you need to take a dump now. So I write to release, to make sense of the world.
Right.
And then in the last few years, I've been trying other creative things that I didn't try when I was growing up. Because I think a lot of time when you're creative, it feels like you have to do it really well, or else it's not worth trying. And I think perfectionism is the enemy of creativity. So I've been trying random stuff, like I learned to play the violin. I bought a violin after many glasses of wine at Christmas a few years ago.
Best time.
I went for lessons for a year to learn to see. I started, I just made with my husband last night, a little creative mobile for our baby, stuff that doesn't matter. And I think when you do things that are creative and that don't matter, you actually fill your cup up for the stuff that you do that does matter. So, yeah, mixed bag. Not constipated, I would say frustrated. Yeah.
I have a slightly different approach to creativity, I would say. I feel like we, as a species, the whole reason we are such a successful animal is we are inherently creative. We're solving problems on a daily basis, fun problems, important problems, functional problems, silly problems. And so the idea that we're separate from creativity and only some people can access certain kinds of creativity, to me, I don't really find it useful. Yeah. And I think that's what I mean by generalist. I think we should all be living a really complex and creative life. Even the fact that you had to get here and figure out the route to get, that's a very creative process to decide what am I wearing, how I'm going to style myself, what route should I take to get wherever I'm going. For me, that's all creativity. It's more functional and sort of in the background, but every day it demands you to be creative, otherwise you're living a very stale, stagnant life. So for me, it's about reclamation of the fact that we've assigned certain people as creatives and the rest of us are just like stagnant blocks. Like taking maths, for example, maths is a fantastically creative field because they're solving questions and problems that haven't been answered before, and only a creative person can do something like that. Yeah. So for me, creativity is a function of being a person, a daily function.
Yeah, I think I resonate quite strongly with that. I think that there's a myth that creativity looks a certain way and it needs to be, the outlet needs to be art. But talking about that, right, like, Tapiwa, you've created over, 600 flavors, different flavors of ice cream.
And didn't bring a single one.
No one is eating ice cream.
It's not for free.
But his shop opens at 12, and it is down the road, Bonnie. Which I keep telling you, for 35 Rand a scoop. And if you have to, never mind. So you've created over 600 individual flavors of African-inspired ice cream.
Yeah. So here's the funny part about creativity, right? People think it's such a difficult thing, and they think it's such an achievement to have like 600 flavors of ice cream. If you consider how many wild fruits we have in Cape Town alone,
Right.
it's a very easy thing to do. Like I can leave right now and go to the taxi rank and pass out like 40 flavors of ice cream based on what I find there. So there's so much of the world to explore, so much to enjoy. I don't find myself feeling like I'm being creative. I'm just looking at what's around me, what's nature providing, what are people, centuries and millennia of people creating things. Oh, I like that dish. Let me make an ice cream from it. That's the least creative part. It's taken ancestors and ancestors to do the hard work. I'm just showing up and taking a little bit and like put some ice cream on it. Yeah. So it's just like building up.
True, but I think there's something for quantifying it. Firstly, like you are the one who told us that you've created 600 flavors. So what was that need to quantify or qualify what you've created, right? And what was the need to make that many? Because you honestly didn't have to. You're only, what, 2 years in existence? Of the
2 years of the shop, yeah.
Of the physical space, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important in the context of the work that I'm doing. I'm looking at making, if you don't know, I make exclusively African flavors of ice cream.
Can you give us an example for people who don't know?
I got
My
600
favorite
examples.
is sweet potato ice cream, which he will not bring back. Carry on.
Oh yeah, so I don't repeat flavors either. So we're talking baobab, blackjacks, speckworm, sour fig, fynbos, different kinds of hibiscus from South Africa, dishes from like Kusisters, buba, faluda, sweetmeats.
You've had Impepo flavored ice cream.
Impepo smoke, clay, earth from around the different parts of the continent, fynbos folk smoke from different fires, and. So the reason I quantified it is because it shouldn't be such a big deal that I'm making African ice cream considering where we live.
Yeah.
But because it's not a common thing to come across, I think it's important to show people just how possible it is, even if you live in a different part of the continent. If you're in Ghana, I can name at least 40 flavors from Ghana that I've made, and I don't live in Ghana. You know, so if you're there, I'm sure you can do a better job of representing your local community. So it's a provocation for people to say. Someone once told me they tried to make a commercial ice cream maker. They tried to make a massy ice cream, it doesn't work. And to that I said, well, maybe you don't care about the massy enough, right? And I regularly feature a massy on the menu, at least 40 flavors now of a massy, different kinds of takes on a massy. So it's, again, to say, I know you know the strawberry chocolate and the blah, 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 blah. That's like 40 flavors, but have you thought about your own culture and this is what I can do, and I'm not even from your culture. What can you do? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting. Jen, I'm really interested in what compelled you to write Adulting 101, because I think that there are a lot of books out there already that I think talk to different experiences, like being a child or transitioning into teenagehood, right? You've all had things that want to talk to you about your bodies or dating or... Yeah. But I'm interested in your focus in adulthood and also, what compelled you and what you see as the marker or the transition into adulthood looks like right now.
Yeah. What compelled me was I was hanging out laundry and I was just like, this is so boring. And we have to do so many things as an adult that are just so boring but necessary in order to do the other things that are interesting to us. And when you are really young, people are open to giving you advice or to sharing the information. And somehow when we feel that we're an adult, we become resistant to getting any information or advice. Like we'll Google stuff, but like if someone wants to actually tell you, so you should do it like this, we can be quite resistant. Right. And so I feel resistant to advice. You can ask my mom, she's sitting in the audience. But I thought, what if there was like a reference guide for stuff that could be tips rather than, this is the rules. These are things that could help you if you tried them. And for me, I didn't write it only for young adults, though I can see how it could be super helpful for someone who's like going out into the world. I wrote it because none of us are experts at being an adult. You know, on the day we die, there's stuff that we haven't tried because we haven't been courageous enough, or we think only the experts can do that. And this was sort of an invitation to just try different things. And it starts with a chapter on sleeping and how important that is. And I can tell you that it's true. That chapter is well researched and personally experienced. But like stuff that you think, my life feels really hard. This book says there's a few things that you could do to make it feel a little bit easier, like breathing, meditation. And it's very different from the other stuff that I've written and produced, because I was writing it during COVID in a time where everything felt so hard. Like I speak in the book about there's 3 things that cause stress. It's uncertainty, a lack of information, and a lack of control, which is basically what we're all have lived through the last 2 years. To try and do anything creative in those conditions is really hard. But this felt easy because I was like, I want to write about sleep. Who knows about sleep? These are the experts. They can tell me. Sorry, microphone people. They can tell me, and I can write it down, and someone else can have that information more easily. So yeah, it was an attempt to make everyone's lives a little bit easier. And for me, when it felt too stressful to create a novel, like it felt easy to do something that was researched and structured in that condition of uncertainty that we were living in.
Right. I also found it interesting that that's how your book starts. Like, literally, the book starts with, this is how you need to sleep.
Yeah.
Sleep is important. Eating is also very important.
Eat ice cream.
Yeah, eating ice cream is also great. And then you go into, like, mental wellness, mental health, looking at the differences, I think you named, between stress, trying to get people to name the differences between stress, anxiety, depression, and trauma.
And burnout.
And burnout. Yeah. And I think that ties in very nicely with Bonnie. Because one of the things you say in your book is that depressed people are forced to have good emotional hygiene. It's part of what makes survival possible for us. The awareness of my condition being a life or death situation pushed me to wholeness. And so I think, what are some of the rituals that you use in order to keep yourself, I guess, tethered? I think in your book you talk about very much about like not wanting to be here, and rituals being one of the things that tether you back to life. And so
well, first of all, I have to do very well at listening to my body, because I exist in my body, and my body is the thing that allows me to move through the world, right? But also my body is speaking to me all the time. And I think when I was younger, it makes me sound like I'm 40. When I was younger, I was just so used to, just eat what you want, do what you want, stay out late, wake up at, an early hour and you can just go and go and go. Whereas now, my body is demanding to be heard, it's demanding attention from me all the time. And I think we're very well versed in the language of pain and pleasure. But there's a whole lot that our body is trying to tell us in between that we haven't really tapped into. So I try to listen to my body and to kind of take those signs and say, okay, what do I need today? That's what self-care is for me. What do I need today? Because that helps me realize that is the thing that will help me to survive. Maybe I've been missing, music. Maybe I've been missing my friends. Maybe I've been missing me. And I need to take a walk, go on a solo date, or whatever it is. And so I think listening to my body is where it starts, because the body, your brain and your body are connected. And so your brain is constantly speaking to your body. And if it feels unheard, it will, kind of make the messages go beep, beep, beep. And so before it gets to that part, I try to kind of center myself and listen. When my knees get better, because both of them are busted now, I want to do things like yoga because they help you connect to your body. And so body work is very important for me, especially because I'm very cerebral. Like I tend to just want to stay here. or I just am very much here. But the connection between the two can be difficult.
Right.
And I find that my body is in tune with itself. So if my body is in tune with what my mind is saying and what my emotions are feeling, then I have a better way of, getting to understand what I need that day and how I survive.
I'm taking what you're saying in. That was that expression.
Okay.
I don't know, do any of you have any comments to that, like in terms of rituals or listening to your body or finding ways to create or ways to be that are not just intellectually based? Jen, I heard you going a lot.
Yeah, sorry, I'm like the worst person to have near a microphone. I think it's so important to exactly what you said, that the mind and the body are not separate, and the more we learn about the brain, the more we know that that's like scientifically true. You probably know it as a molecular biologist. Everything in our body is talking to each other at the time. When we realize we're hungry, like those messages have been sent long before we actually realize, for example. Right. One of the basic things that we like forget to do is breathe properly, which is the second part of adulting is about taking a deep breath. So often when you're stressed or you're sitting in a position of anxiety or depression, you breathe like right at the top of your lungs in short, shallow breaths, and you don't breathe down into your body. And that actually limits the oxygen that goes into your cells. It makes you much more tired. It makes it harder to just be a good human. It makes you feel worse. So you get into this cycle of like, you're breathing like this and then not taking a deep breath. And when you take a deep breath, you can feel your body relax. So I think even like a short meditation practice every day can help you. Something that I was doing before I created the baby was my husband and I would do yoga. I mean, you think it's going one way, but I'm actually talking about something completely kosher. Was doing yoga every morning. So there's so much free yoga on the internet. I know we're supposed to be talking about capitalism as well, which is like the crusher of all joy. But there's so much free stuff out there on the internet. You don't have to pay 1,000 Rand a month to go to yoga classes. So we would just do a free 20-minute yoga video every morning and then do a free meditation afterwards from the internet. And you feel like such a different human when you've just taken the time to tune in as the first thing of the day. And sometimes what you find when you tune in is that you're really sad that day, or that you are burnt out, or you're angry about something, and that's better because then it doesn't come up in some other way as like a headache or a pain in your back or a desire to eat the entire contents of Tapiwa's 600 flavor fridge. Those are all things that your body is sending a signal and it's wanting you to pay attention. But you can get in a cycle where you're paying attention in the wrong way by drinking too much or not sleeping enough or by eating 600 flavors of ice cream in one go. I'm not advocating not to eat your ice cream. I'm 100% going to eat your ice cream. But we do things that are self-destructive because it makes us feel like we're doing something, when it's often the opposite of that. It's ignoring what's going on mentally or in our bodies.
Right.
Yeah. So breathe, take a deep breath. Let's do it now. Let's all go. It feels nice, yeah.
It feels good.
Yeah.
I think as a species, we also take ourselves way too seriously. We think too highly of ourselves. And I like to say to people, we are animals. Remember that part? Because we like to make things very complex, and we think the answers to the questions that we have, whether they're medical, romantic, philosophical, are all somewhere, deep there. And sure, we have the ability to think at that level, but also we have to remember that we are animals, and we need the basic things that animals need, sleeping well, eating well, breathing well.
Right.
So, I mean, it's no coincidence that when you're having a panic attack, the thing that you struggle to do is to breathe. So we're very simple in that way, and I think we just need to pay attention to the fact that, yes, we are complex human beings in the sense that our minds, we think, are more evolved than, animals that we like to dominate, but we're also just simple animals.
Yeah, I think both Jen and Bonnie are really interested in what it means to be well, right, in different ways in this society. And in both of their books, they really talk about the South African condition and how it shows up in different ways. yeah, I think Bonnie's book is a wild ride that takes us to public hospitals, talks about the importance of generations. Generations was an era, and we need to all respect
Yeah.
the era that was generations. Um, generations looking at navigating the workplace, but also, like one of the things that you wrote in your book as well was that you said, but you can't heal yourself, and self-awareness is not healing. And in Jen's book, you did a Twitter survey of 219 people, I think. And one of the things that she asked people how stressed they were. And I think you had different time frames.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel stressed every day? Is it like once a week? Is it once a month? And about 40%, I think.
See, every day.
Yeah, about 40% of respondents said that they felt stress every single day. And so I'm just wondering then in this idea of, okay, so at the end of the day, I'm also feeling that like it's not just a singular,
Structural.
we can breathe all we want and we can eat
yeah.
and we can sleep
Yeah.
well, but there's something about the way that we live that doesn't allow us to be well.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, I zoned out in my head.
Are you talking about like structural oppression and violence and the way that it doesn't make us feel good, and then you can't self-care your way out of systemic oppression? That's where I was going in my head.
Yeah, what are some of the obstacles
Yeah.
that you see that make it difficult to show up for yourself, or show up for your community, or show up for your creative work?
Bills, paying the bills. It doesn't pay often to be a creative. It pays in other ways, like being in spaces like this where you can share and, connect with people. But being a creative is often really underpaid. It's undervalued, and I agree that everybody is creative, but some people have chosen to make it their profession, and those people are often really struggling financially, which then you get in a cycle of struggling to produce because you're struggling to pay your bills. I think we all saw at the beginning of the lockdown the people protesting at the National Arts Council and at the Department of Arts and Culture, because artists, who are the people who help us survive things like the COVID pandemic, were people who didn't have access to money. And that's one thing that I got in a newsletter that I subscribed to this week, was how it's both empowering and disempowering to recognize that structural things keep us anxious. So when you recognize that the world is chaos, we're about to go into World War III, capitalist system is oppressing the majority of people, South Africa has a fucked up history of race relations, gender relations, power relations, it can feel very overwhelming because you can't really do anything about that most of the time, one person. So you feel like even worse because you can't change the system. But at the same time, knowing that can help you feel better about why you feel anxious, because it's not just you, it's all of us, and you shouldn't be made to feel like it's your fault for not feeling well in a society that is profoundly sick. So feeling well in a profoundly sick society is a sign of a problem, right? It's a sign that you're not paying attention and noticing the world around you. But noticing can be really painful, and I think when you are a person who's trying to write, who's trying to create, you're tuned into the pain all around you, and sometimes that's debilitating, like it stops you from doing anything at all. Right. And so doing those like basic self-care things that don't cost any money are ways to just stay afloat in like a really choppy sea most of the time.
I agree with Jen. I think capitalism is perhaps the single most biggest thing that makes it hard to be a neurodivergent person in the world. On the basic level, like it's hard to access mental health resources, but it's also hard to be a person who lives and is allowed to be bad at things. Like, I feel like we're not allowed to be bad at things, and we need to be bad at things because that's part of enjoyment. I mean, kids love to do all sorts of weird things and they're excited and they're proud of it. And I feel like we lose that as we grow because even our hobbies we want to turn into something that is going to give us monetary value.
Right.
And so there's nothing that you can enjoy just for the sake of enjoying it. You know, if Jen becomes really, really good, for instance, at her violin playing, then she might feel like, I need money, maybe I should do this like on the side, you know? Does anybody
Right.
need a violinist for their show? Because we just have this pressure to create, pressure to always be producing, and that's what capitalism tells you, is that unless you're working hard, you're not worthy. So like it really, there's a hierarchy in capitalism. That's the only way in which it can survive. And so you feel like if you're not producing enough or doing stuff that brings as much monetary value as people who are at the top of big capital, then you feel like you're not worthy. So it attacks inherently your worthiness. And so that makes it hard to be a human being, because, I mean, in order to live and breathe, you have to have some kind of, you know, belief that I deserve to be here. I deserve to be moving and breathing and doing whatever I want to be. So capitalism is really hard and is like a huge trigger for me. And I think actually that it's impossible to be alive underneath capitalism and not be at some point in your life neurodivergent. Like if you're like an adult who's had a job, you have had some kind of mental illness. You've had a panic attack, you've had burnout, which has been classified as a mental illness. You know, you've just had something that has not sat right with you because your body's like, this is not natural for us. So capitalism is a huge deterrent. And also, why does Jeff Bezos hog so many resources? Sorry. What do you need with 220 billion?
Jeff Bezos? That is the takeaway. Why does Jeff Bezos hog so many resources?
He could live 200 years and still not run through that money.
It's gross.
That is gross.
It is gross. But I wanted to come back to your point about burnout. I'm not sure, how many of us here know and understand what burnout is? I don't know. It's not very confident.
They're tired. It's early.
I don't know, Jane, I'm going to hand over to you, because burnout has been defined, and it's different to depression, although some of the symptoms might be similar. But I think it's important for us to understand what we're talking about when we use different words, and I think that's also something that comes out in your book and in yours, right? Because people will use words like, I'm depressed, but there's a clinical definition of what depression means and how it functions and what and how it shows up, how it operates, and the same with burnout. So I'm going to hand over to you, Jen.
So the World Health Organization has classified burnout as an occupational health disease. So they only frame it in terms of the workplace, where you get really tired and then you get the symptoms of depression. So it's physical stuff like feeling fatigued all the time, but it's also emotional. You tend to react on a sort of shorter fuse. But all of this is sort of medical language, and I should have put a disclaimer at the beginning of my book that I'm not like a doctor or a psychologist. I'm a writer and a researcher.
Right.
So the useful thing that I found was that burnout is being tired from life, and depression is being tired of life. So they feel the same, but the cause there is different. Burnout is when we're pushing ourselves really to the extremes. And one of the things that I've learned in my life is, if you're a person who's trying to do stuff in the world, either you're trying to create something new, or you're trying to be an activist, or you're trying to make a point with whatever you're doing in life, you feel like you have to give all of the time, because taking for yourself is selfish when everything is such a mess. So taking the time out is super, super important, and burnout can be a effect of that, because you give and you give, and giving and resting is selfish. You're not there for the cause. Or my day job that pays my bills, that allows me to do stuff, is in working in gender inequality and gender-based violence. Like, that stuff is hard going, and saying like, I need to go for a cappuccino when you know that there's a women's shelter that doesn't have any money, feels difficult a lot of the time, and it can feel compulsive to keep doing that thing at your own expense. So I think that idea that it's from life versus of life is helpful, because you can say, okay, I'm going to stop just for today. And something that was helpful to me was the idea that because we exist in this terrible, profound inequality, there are so many people who are working to address it, And if you take a rest day today, it's okay. Someone else is going to carry on doing that work. Like you are allowed to have a break, because doing stuff when you feel terrible is not actually helpful to anybody, and it's certainly not helpful to yourself in the long run. Whereas depression is tired of life, and it requires often medical assistance, or at least talking to a mental health professional or to someone who understands. And it's not like, I'm so depressed, you know, that episode of my favorite show got cancelled. It's not the same thing. That's why I classified those terms, so we stop using the wrong word, because it takes from people who are experiencing real conditions when you don't respect what they're going through.
Right. I don't know. Thank you. Bonnie, maybe you'd like to comment, because also you speak in your book about going from just describing yourself as depressed to being clinically diagnosed, and what that diagnosis meant for your life and how it changed the way that you decided to live. I don't know.
I think it was freeing, because for the first time I understood that, you know, I had this niggling feeling like I'm not okay. And I remember sitting on the floor with my friends, and we just like smoked weed and had wine, and it was that, you know, that come down phase where now everybody gets philosophical and everybody's like, real life. And I was like, I'm not okay. They're like, why? You're doing so great. I was like, I don't know, but I'm not okay. And so I finally got the answer to, I'm not okay. Because externally, some things in my life may have seemed like I have it all together, but internally I just felt off. So the diagnosis helped me to understand that, okay, you know, there is a reason why you're not feeling okay for such a prolonged period of time, and what to do with it after that. So it was freeing for me. Not to say that it made it easier to live with it, but I think it made it easier to take care of myself.
Right.
Like, if I have days where I really cannot get out of bed, I'm like, yeah, then I'm not going to, because I've tried and I've really tried, but it feels like my body is, like there's a sumo wrestler sitting on top of me, and you literally cannot get out of bed. I don't know how to explain it, because people will come in and they'll say, you've been in, my sister, when I lived with my sister last, so she'd be like, you've been in bed the whole day. And I'm like, I'm going through the SADS. You know, that was our language or our shorthand for, yeah, today's one of those days where I like, breathing is what I can do, basically. So I'm kinder to myself, because I have the diagnosis. I don't feel the pressure to be like, you know, and if I'm 5 minutes late for work, I remember I was 5 minutes late for work twice in a row, and my boss was like, so, first of all, let's discuss, is it 9:30 or 9:35 that you come into work? And I was like, ugh, is this a Winnie Mandela moment? Or must the Archbishop do it? And I was just like, 9:30. But that's, you know, so I understand that those microaggressions are ableist, you know, and I don't take it on personally. I'm like, bro, I am here at 9:35, and it wasn't 10 o'clock. That is the victory for me, you know, so I reward myself for the fact that I know that it could have been 10 o'clock, but I'm here at 9:35, and 5 minutes in the grand scheme of trying to stay alive and survive a brain that's sabotaging you is nothing. You know what I mean? So the diagnosis helped me to be like, perspective. Yeah.
Tapiwa, how do you take care of yourself because for the longest time you have been the sole employee of your business, and you've spoken about how much it takes to show up 6 days a week for 6 hours, making all the flavors, and what people, you made a post about what people expect of you, and you're telling people, like, what did you say? You said something like, I spend more of my time with you and your thoughts than I do with my own self, with my own peace, with my own friends. And so, yeah, how has showing up for your business, I guess, affected your work and your inner well-being?
It's a really important question. It's a really important question. And the challenges are we lose our humanity when there's money involved. And we treat people like things we can purchase. And what it then creates is an environment where we expect certain behavior from people because I've got the potential to give you money. And why is this flavor sold out? Why are you 3 minutes late? Why is this Uber guy? How can you rate someone on a 5-star system to bring you a milkshake on a motorbike in the rain? Right, this is the world we live in now. Right? So it is a necessity of life to have some kind of job, some kind of money maker. And I find it very disappointing in our species that we spend our time doing that thing. You know, like when people ask you what do you do, they don't mean what do you do with your life, it's how do you make your money essentially, right? So part of what I'm doing for myself is to challenge customers, to challenge people coming to the space who have an entitlement attitude, right? And I'm very confrontational about it because it's important you know that I disagree with you, and it's important you know that I'm a person and you're asking me to break myself for your treat, you know? That's really fucked up. So the biggest shift I've had in the last 2 years since opening the cafe is I know I've always taken care of myself in different ways. What's changed now is because I'm front-facing. I used to work in a research lab and I could navigate my boss relatively easily, my colleagues relatively easily. Right? But they're not customers. Customers are a different kind of beast. So I don't tolerate abuse in my space, and customer experience is abusive. Yeah. So if I feel you're being abusive towards me because you feel you've bought me, we're going to have a problem there. So that's an important frontline for me, people to understand. I'll rather go broke than for you to think you can buy my life. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to ask one more question, and then in 2 minutes, I'm going to open it up to the floor. So if you have any burning questions, don't be shy. Oh, not yet, but I see you. I appreciate that forthrightness. And then I'm interested also, Tapiwa, because in the ways, in the different ways that you've chosen to, I guess, express creativity in your shop, which includes your murals. I don't know what you call them.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Your murals? Yeah,
That's
yeah,
fine.
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
You've got murals that you've drawn, and all of them, if people care to ask, then they have significance to you. You've also got a manifesto on the wall, and you have now got your first employee. Do you have two? One?
Two.
You have 2 employees.
Yay!
But I'm interested in kind of why you decided to, like, what was the reason, I guess, what compelled you to draw and express in that way? Was it a marketing tactic? Is that just a form of expression? Does it tie into your business in any way? And if so, in what ways? Maybe you could talk more about that. Also, side note that what he's wearing is also his uniform, and the logo on his shirt is also something that you created, right? Yeah. So you'll see those kinds of... You'll also see those emblems and drawings if you go to his space on Lower Main Road, Tapi. Okay, Tapiwa.
I think something fundamental that we either learn and forget about, or we don't really internalize, is once you've learned something, any new piece of information doesn't belong in the place where you learned it only. All right, so as I grow old, I'm getting better at recognizing that there's a lot of things that I can do as a human being that don't have to stay in the box in which I learned them. So, for example, I enjoyed listening to stories growing up from my elders, like sitting around a fire in the village. And recently I realized, as I grew older, I heard less and less of those kind of stories. And in publications and movies and film, it's very rare to see stories from home or stories from this continent. And it's also very rare to feel black all the time, right? As an African, as a black person, nothing about this room besides black faces makes me feel I'm doing something black, right? Nothing about the Persian rug here, the woodwork. Some of the plants are local, some of them aren't. I knew I wanted my space to be suffocatingly black, right? Like to the point where you don't have to make a deal about, oh, this is a black thing, that's a black thing, right? Or the whole space is black, just get on with it, right? In the same way, if you open a fridge at Pick and Pay, once in a while I should feel I should go for something Italian because I feel like being exotic. But once in a while, getting the black thing is an exotic thing, right? So we're perpetually little black Europeans, right? And so I knew my space needed to be very pro-African in all sorts of different ways. And part of it is the murals tell stories from around the continent. I do calligraphy, and each piece tells a story from a different tribe, either cosmology, spirituality, philosophy, stories that I think are really amazing stories. And a huge chunk of them, I don't believe in the literal meaning of the stories, but the power behind them and the fact that someone else does believe in that story, it needs to be told. So even in the way I describe the flavors, it's really important that I tell what that flavor really means to someone who knows that flavor. And when someone from Gambia walks in and they see something from back home and they tell me, I can't believe you did this nonsense thing with our dish, it's amazing, it's really powerful. In the same way, when they see the artwork as well, they can't believe they're learning about their own story from me, some guy from Zimbabwe, So all this to say is I've learned a bunch of different things throughout my life: graphic design, molecular biology, body movement, sex education, blah, 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 blah. And I don't have the professional boundary to say we're selling ice cream today, don't ask me about sex. Right? If you know me through my sex work, let's talk about it. If you know me through my art, let's talk about it. There's no room for this idea of little box human beings and the brand image and the importance of being correct in the public eye and being curated in the public eye. Yeah. There's one thing that I hate about interviews is someone sending me questions ahead of time so you can prepare for the interview. Then you filter yourself. I really love speaking honestly. So the space is about honesty and being very clear that every single one is a complex creature. We're not distinct packets of existence in moments to moments. Yeah. So the stories are a part of that. Same with the food and everything else.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to open it up to the floor. We have our first question over. Wait, there's a mic for you. Don't worry, you don't have to project.
Hello, my name's Lisa. I'm actually a music research practitioner, and it's been wonderful hearing you guys speak today. I really appreciate it. And I've just got a couple of questions.
Ooh, could we have one question?
Okay, one question. Have you heard the term of social prescribing? So that's it's instead of like when you're having your burnout or depression, instead of going straight for the medical side of things, you go and you do something that's going to make you feel better. If you're going to read your books, or so I feel like you guys are the prescribers. So people will go and read your books to help their lives. Or if you want to go and if you're having a tough time, go and search for music or art. So instead of jumping straight onto a medical train, you prescribe yourself something socially that's going to make you better and feel more happier with your well-being and your mental health. And I feel like Corona's really made us think about that, and internally a lot of us are more self-aware, and we're all, capitalism's also challenging our self-identity.
Right.
So that's just my little statement, and yeah.
Oh, so there's no question.
Well, and asking about if you knew what social prescribing is, yeah.
Would you like to comment, or?
Okay, well, what I'm kind of understanding from that is talking about different healing modalities, I suppose. Yes. So there are a lot of healing modalities that don't have to do with like traditional medicine or conventional medicinal interventions. And I am now really interested in looking more into what were the African ways in which we survived before we were westernized. I had a researcher and psychologist on my podcast called Dr. Manuko Ratala, and she was saying that, I think it's in the Congo, if a member of their tribe is having a problem, an issue, or some kind of, slump, they put them in the middle of a circle, there's the gathering element, there's the we're going to eat together element and whatever, and they speak things to them that they want to kind of call out. So they'll say, Faye, you're an amazingly kind person. Faye, you're this. Faye, you're that. Faye, you're that. So kind of speaking to you the opposite of what your brain might be telling you, which is good and effective in its own way. And I'm not saying that that's the only way that you can heal, but I mean, it was just very interesting to me that healing in that instance had to be communal. And we know that community is very essential to healing. If you have any kind of disease, but especially if you're neurodivergent, because the pills on their own won't help you if you do take pills. If you're alone, you really just, start to think, well, then why am I here? And I like to say that I have to have it as a value of mine that my thoughts are not always right. So that kind of stuck out to me because it would show me and help me to realize that, oh yes, the thoughts that are saying that I'm useless, I don't belong here, I'm stupid, all of these things, those thoughts are not right because the people around me believe differently. And so they kind of usher me into that space where I can begin to believe different things. So I think psychology and mental health practice generally is very westernized, and there's so much more that we can do that doesn't include pumping pills into our bodies. Right. There are kids here, so I can't say some other things.
I hope that answered or spoke to what you were saying. Do we have any more hands?
Morning, my name is Teresa. I'm interested in this idea, the whole point of capitalism and creativity where it intersects is to commoditize creativity, which is the space you all work in. But what do you do for yourself to be creative that you don't turn into a commodity? It's just for yourself to show yourself, this is for me, a creative thing I'm going to do for myself.
A few different things. Top of that list, sex. All right. It is one of the most creative things a person can do, whether alone or with other people. And the way I approach intimacy and sensuality, it doesn't have to be a reward-based thing or a goal-based thing. It's just have fun, let loose, throw caution to the wind, laugh, be silly, be happy, and there's no physical thing you're making to prove that you had your sex, right? It's just a feeling. So it takes away pressure to say, guys, look, I made my macaroni art, now it's on the wall, and people can evaluate it, right? If you're within a healthy experience with someone or with yourself, having the sex is the thing you've done. It doesn't have to be like, oh, that sex was 10 out of 10, this was 5. You know, it's just like we had a great time, you know.
5 stars.
So I know when I'm really struggling, sex, food, and movement go out the window. Those are the things that suffer the most. When I can see, if I'm not having a good time with any of those 3 things, I know I'm in trouble. Yeah, for sure. So that's a great way, and most people can have sex or can access sex even if it's by yourself. Yeah. So highly recommend. 10 out of 10.
There's a documentary on Netflix called The Principles of Pleasure, and one of the women there is studying how masturbation helps women who are depressed, and obviously, you know, it releases the kind of hormones that you need, the oxytocins, the dopamines, all of that. So, yeah, that is scientific and true.
Oh, you weren't
Intimacy
co-signing?
helps.
You weren't like, this is what I also do creatively?
I was co-signing. I didn't know if I was allowed to say masturbation is good for the brain. Because they're kids and I don't know how much
I
you
feel
tell
like
me.
you
It's
really
better they
said
learn it
sex,
now.
so you just
Okay,
would.
I'm co-signing.
Yeah, agree.
As long, yeah, so.
I was going to say macaroni art, but now I feel embarrassed. And I can also just say, as someone who took a while to make a baby, that when you turn sex into something that's for an object, like we're trying to make a baby, it takes all of that away. So, like, it is true that you have to be able to have it where it's just fun as well. Otherwise, you steal the joy from that activity. And I do think commodifying anything, expecting an output rather than an input and the joy that you experience. So, like, for example, I think cooking is a really fun, creative thing that we can all do. And people are often say, oh, I don't know how to cook, and you know, I just order on Uber all the whole time. But the internet is full of recipes and things for you to try out, even just adding different spices. Something that I mentioned in the book that I heard on a podcast was, can you try and eat 100 different ingredients in a week?
Wow.
So it's not like make a meal that has 100 different ingredients, but can you eat like radishes? I started eating radishes after trying that because they're so amazing. But adding a different spice in, what does that do to a meal that you're familiar with is really fun, creative process. And keeping track, and I've never gotten to 100, but those weeks are always so much more fun. My meals are so much more interesting, and I feel excited about cooking instead of like, oh, it's supper time, I have to eat again. What am I going to make? And I'm like, oh, I have to try 5 things, otherwise I'm not going to make it to my quota for today. What can I put in that will make this more fun? Is really like a nice way to treat yourself. And in terms of your microbiome, it introduces new things into your body that it may have needed that you didn't know, which is really cool as well.
Thanks. We have time for one more question. Oh,
Whoa.
I am not choosing.
Hey guys, I was going to ask a more random question. On your best days, what do you guys have for breakfast?
Quickly, we have 2 minutes, so if you can answer it in a sentence, 5 points, 5 stars.
I normally only eat supper, so on the best day I don't eat anything, really. If I'm feeling like shit, then I'm eating
I
something.
said a sentence.
It was a comma.
It was a
Comma, semicolon, you ain't slick.
Grammar. Oats, solid bowl of oats.
On my best day, I have breakfast, period.
And that's that on that. Then you can ask that the last question, Ima. That person, and then I'll wrap it up, I promise.
Thanks. Hi everyone, my name is Nletesa. I have a question that's quite adjacent to your question. What I hear in your creativity, right? There's the process, there's what you produce, and in the production, in the product, if I can say that, there's also the message that you're kind of hoping is going to be transmitted as well. How, and you're doing it within an institution, well, gosh, an intersection of institutions, but one of them is capitalism, that, like all other institutions, exists to endure. So as you push back, right, and I heard pushback in each of your, it finds ways to kind of resist your rebellion. How do you continue to keep yourselves vigilant? And in your reflections, I'm hoping that we can all find ways for ourselves. How do you continue to keep yourselves, continue to be accountable to the message as opposed to becoming institutionalized?
I'm also going to ask if you could all try and sum it up in like a sentence.
I feel strongly about this, if that's okay.
Take it.
Be very clear about why you're doing what you're doing. Be very clear from the get-go before you start on that journey. I'm clear. What I'm focused on is how do I rehabilitate the ego of another black person on this continent? Whatever comes after that, does it serve that function or not? Yeah. Money often doesn't. Yeah. So that's how I try and stay. I could be very rich, but I wouldn't be fulfilled. Yeah. So I'm very clear why I'm doing what I'm doing.
And on that note, I would like to thank the Open Book Festival. I would like to thank all of you. And obviously, I would like to thank the wonderful panelists. You can buy Broken Porcelain and Adulting 101 downstairs. And at 12 o'clock, you can proceed to Tapi, which is on Lower Main Road. It is opposite Jerry's and Ob's Cafe in a little corridor. So you will not see a big sign, but if you see like a gaping hole, just walk through it. And yeah, so thank you everyone.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
the rest of your day.